Here we go. Hi guys, good afternoon now. My name is Brian Vacher from Flight-1. We are the market leader in providing canopy instruction both to the sport and the military world, and it's great fun. So I want to take you through, or today what we're talking about is a section of the sport where we're looking at unintentional canopy collisions, how to avoid them, how to survive. And that's taken from our canopy program, basically the foundation series, the 100 series, just to take you guys and put you in the picture about where this sits. This information comes at the 103 level, so it's kind of when you go back into the general population of skydiving after training your individual canopy skills. We also offer the 200 series, which is obviously an introduction to high performance work and building speed. The 300 series, which is really developing that performance work, that's really the high performance stuff. And then the air-to-air stuff, my personal favorite, which is where we're working with you on an individual basis and kind of, I like to think of it as the wind tunnel for canopy flight. This year we've also launched a couple of new courses, the 401, which is the competition side of things, and also we are really happy to announce the launch of our tandem program for tandem instructors. What we wanted to do today is cover avoidance and survival of canopy collisions. I'm talking here about unintentional sport canopy collisions rather than intentional crew collisions or dockings. So there are a lot of things that we're taking for granted here. First of all, to say that there are hundreds of different scenarios that can occur. Okay, we're not trying to teach you crew here and give you the answer for every single situation. However, we can generalize very widely in terms of how to deal with these different situations and give you some clear messages. So the first thing we want to do is talk about how to avoid it. The two most likely places that we're going to avoid or a canopy collision I'll start that again. The two most likely places that we have where canopy collisions are the most likely are immediately after opening and within the pattern, within the landing pattern itself. Okay? Hopefully then we can talk about some revision about why this happens, and hopefully this is a revision for most of you guys, why this happens and how we can make some fairly simple steps to make sure it doesn't happen to us. It happens with poor separation at opening, poor tracking, okay, loss of line of flight awareness, so that means which direction is the aircraft flying in and where other canopy is likely to be. It's also when we lose altitude awareness and suddenly we find ourselves low and we start getting canopies out very quickly in close proximity to each other. And if one or more loses canopy control, so that means I'm in twists. For example, I don't have active steering over my canopy. I'm dealing with a potential malfunction at that time, so I haven't got control over my canopy. How do I avoid it at opening? Okay, well, we're not going to go into all of these things, but proper packing, knowing where the group is before me, after me, in front of me, understanding the upper environment, what we're talking about, upper winds here, where the line of flight is, where my expected opening point is, where the other groups are likely to be. And also exit separation. We could get into a wonderful debate here about free flyers and flat flyers and the time and so on. We've found consistently the only way to guarantee efficient exit separation is based on time. And rather than get into that here, we can talk about that at some other point. We also need to clear our airspace during the track and obviously during our pull sequence. If I need to steer away, I'm going to use my rear risers. That's kind of generally considered to be the way. I need to get onto the back risers as quick as I can and I need to steer away. Everybody, of course, turns right, head-to-head turn right. One little thing about that, in terms of the mechanics of how a canopy turns, I want to show you guys something. When I send a canopy into a right-hand turn, I will send my canopy to the right. So my wing above my head will go over to the right-hand side. My body will swing out to the left-hand side. So if we take that head-to-head scenario, and you can have a look at my hands here, and we're flying towards each other, watch what happens when both people turn right. We actually send our parachutes away from each other, but we run the risk of a body-to-body contact. So we do say head-to-head, turn right, but unless left is quicker. All right. just make the right call. It's very, very difficult call, and it may also be in a head-to-head. It might be better to take the collision if we are dealing with material. But we're going to talk about that in a second when we get up to collisions. If we're side by side, then obviously we're going to turn away from the other person. Shouting, opening and closing legs, making sure that each other can be seen is also important. And as I've just said, what we do really want to avoid is body-to-body contact. So just have a moment to think about that in terms of when we do radical right turns. We need to be able to steer away, but remember that we can swing our body in the opposite direction. Okay, why does it happen during pattern? Well, that's where everyone's getting busy, right? And if we have a poor or no flight plan, then we're not flying predictably with each other. Okay, the whole purpose of a flight plan is to fly predictably without the use of radio communications or air traffic control. So if we don't fly a pattern, we're not being obvious to other people. Or we're using erratic canopy control. And I'm going to get shot here, but things like S-turns. S-turns is an erratic canopy control. Big turns, 360s over the landing area. Any of these big inputs that we're talking about is erratic canopy control. Conflicting patterns coming from the opposite direction sometimes happens, all right? And also not splitting the areas of high-performance landings and standard landing approaches. Other thing to think about is have a think of your home drop zone, your home LZ, and have a think about what your landing area looks like. Is it big, open, wide, square, round, approaching from every direction? Is it a triangular? Does it funnel you at any point towards each other? Are there obstacles there, which means that it's combined? And the good old target fixation. I must land in the P's. I must hit the cross. Okay, all these are causes during the pattern. How do I avoid it? I work out how to flight plan effectively. Okay, hopefully by this stage, this is revision for everybody. And I understand that holding a landing direction is much more important than chasing the windsock. So we are moving from old school over the last 5-10 years. We're definitely moving from old school ways of thinking about landing into the wind, must land into the wind. We know our landing priorities. And we're moving towards understanding that we're much more like aircraft landing on runways. That's the way I like to see it on landing areas. I understand that this is the direction I'm flying. This is the direction I've agreed with everybody else. And I need to hold my landing direction. If I need to use S-turns, there are ways to step out. There are flat turns, and we can actually slow the parachute system down, okay, and avoid using S-turns. So I know that we come from maybe old school teaching or methods of thinking, or through a progression system that endorses S-turns, but there are alternatives to S-turns. We can also separate the landing areas, and at any time we can take an alternate landing area. Hopefully up till now, this is all good, right? Hopefully now we can get into the meaty stuff. If we need to avoid each other, we generally have a top and a bottom jumper. Okay, so we're talking about a situation where it's pretty easy to define. You're flying along and you're the top jumper. If a canopy is going to come from anywhere below you, your exit is up and above. Okay, that's very, very important to realize. So therefore, my easiest input to maintain my altitude, if you like to climb on the person that's coming up to me, is to use brake input. This is the coolest thing to be able to do. Have the confidence to extend your legs. Our natural feeling when we have somebody coming up who hasn't seen us from below is to lift our legs up and get ourselves, or try and protect our body. But if we extend our legs, we can step on their top skin. And you're going to see a video about how effective that is in a second. So an emergency procedure, if I feel like somebody's coming up from underneath me, is to get onto brakes and extend my legs. This is what it looks like. Whoop! Toggles and extended legs. This is what it looks like from inside, from the bottom jumper, and you can tell how much he enjoys it by looking at the expression on his face. This is one of our Flight-1 instructors. He didn't like that. All right, let's do that one again. That was good. All right, so you can see how effective it is in terms of descending the other canopy away. All right, and then he's going into his emergency procedures that we're going to talk about in a second. All right, very simple. If you're the bottom jumper, okay, and you suddenly realize that you're coming up and you're going to hit somebody, obviously our escape is down. and we need to get down as quickly as possible. The tool that we use under the parachute to get down is front risers, preferably to the outside if we can do that and clear the airspace, so that we can pick up the other canopy over our shoulder and we can maintain visuals. Okay, so a single front riser to the outside would be good. Obviously, if we're going to make a big move where we're descending, it'd be good to clear the airspace and make sure we have enough altitude to use this maneuver. All right, pick up the other jumper from the inside shoulder and maintain the visuals with him. What we never do if we're underneath is panic and go onto brakes to try and slow down. Full flight, let it drop down, excuse me, or even better, front risers. This is what it looks like if you're the bottom jumper. It's coming up, you've suddenly seen someone there, so obviously these are staged, onto the fronts, get onto the outside front riser, drive it away. This is what it looks like from the inside. Somebody there, onto the fronts, down and away. Very simple. Where we think about, or a generalization or a summation of how to think about canopy collisions and how to make sure it never happens to me, is to fly in a way that we think where everybody else has right of way except me. Okay? It's a kind of a polite thing. It's kind of understanding that I am actually the person here that needs to be looking out for everybody else. And 3 cool things to know. In order for me to have a canopy collision, I need to be in the same place at the same height at the same time. The best thing about this is if we manage to eliminate just one of these 3 things, we'll never have a canopy collision. All right. Unfortunately, I've tried to avoid, and for whatever reason, I can't avoid it, and now we need to talk about this different scenarios when we have to survive our canopy collision. We kind of split the 2 collisions into 2 areas. We kind of define them slightly into 2 different areas. First of all, what we call a wrap. A wrap we defined as any part of myself or my equipment is entangled in material of another person's canopy. And an entanglement, when a part of myself, my equipment, has gone through the lines of another person's canopy. And we define them those 2 ways because we are going to react perhaps in very different ways. The first thing we're going to do is talk about material, wraps, and we're going to talk about these situations and their general situations above a hard deck. Now this is quite an important question, because if you're doing crew, you'll talk to each other before you do that and you'll agree a hard deck. Yeah, if we're doing canopy work, then maybe you agree a hard deck. But in the sport world, we're not going to necessarily have agreed a hard deck with the people that we're running in, that we're jumping with in terms of canopy collisions. So we need to think to ourselves and think personally, what is our hard deck? What is my personal hard deck? And that will be based upon the type of parachute that you're jumping hugely, including your wing loading, and also how aggressive you are, how comfortable you are, and therefore how experienced you are about where your hard deck is. We generally recommend that we use an absolute hard deck of where your flight plan would start. So if you're fairly new to the sport and you're flying a conservative canopy and you start making your pattern work at 1,000 feet, then really your decision altitude is by about 1,000 feet. If you're jumping a 69 and you've got a lot of time in the sport, maybe you recommend that actually your pattern work would start about 2,300 feet or 2,500 feet, so your hard deck might be higher. Maybe you're a more conservative jumper, so maybe it's 2,000, 2,500 feet. Okay? So just have a think personally before you go out jumping next about what your personal hard deck could be. All right, if we wrap, what happens or what causes a wrap is that the canopy wants to move forward. When we make contact, or a part of that material makes contact with something such as a canopy or a body, then it will stop flying on that side. The remainder of the canopy will continue moving forward and then basically swing ball around that point. Okay, and which is how a wrap actually happens. It's quite fun. All right, what we need to do is think about what are we going to do if this happens to us, if I'm the bottom jumper. The first thing I want to do is understand that, in fact, chances are, if this occurs to me and if it's occurred to any of you in the audience, it happens pretty quickly. And if it's going to solve itself, it happens pretty quickly. The reason why is what happens is the load starts to build on the bottom system. And so the tension increases between the 2 systems. So if that's not happening by itself immediately within a couple of seconds, then we need to help the system. We need to increase that tension. And the way that we increase that tension is to reach up and grab the front riser, drive the canopy away from the top jumper. Okay? We need to increase tension in the systems. Hopefully then we'll find that the two systems just separate. Top jumper, all we need to do is think about protecting our handles. I'm also the top jumper, so I have got a great canopy. All right? If I have to take this collision that's about to happen, I always want to try and hit the center of somebody's canopy rather than going around the edge. If you think about the mechanics, it's natural for us to be trying to turn away from someone, but if my body as the top jumper hits the side of somebody else's canopy, that's definitely going to increase the chances of that rotation happening, that wrap mechanics happening. Okay? If I hit that canopy square on, okay, and actually hit in the center cell, that canopy is going to wrap around me in whatever direction, like a big duvet, and then very shortly afterwards, it's going to come off, okay, because it's going to maintain symmetry. So we always want to go for the center. I'm not saying go up and find someone to fly into to try it out. All right, oh, it's close, so I thought I'd go for the center. All right, but if it's obvious that contact's going to be made, then the material's the best, and we want to go for the center. We don't want to necessarily go for the lines, and we've got here a standard kind of response for if you're going to hit the lines and it's slow speed, get big. And this comes from many, many years of parachute training, but it's quite a big ask for someone to start going as they see lines coming towards them. Okay, just because obviously the size of the lines that we're using nowadays, and the speeds at which the parachute systems are flying. You saw that from John's presentations earlier. So yes, slow, get big. But I can understand if you don't. I won't hold it against you. The key thing as the top jumper is you're good. You've got a parachute. So you may not be able to see where you're flying. You may just be seeing material. You may not know what altitude you're at, but you know that you have got a good parachute above you. So we cannot just panic and go straight for a cutaway. How do we deal with these situations? It's going to be the same, and we're going to offer you an acronym, okay, to remember and take away. And there's some key points from this. The acronym we're going to give you is ACT. ACT stands for altitude. Okay, we want to monitor your own altitude and verbalize this as much as possible, even if you can hear each other. Okay, and you're in some sort of wrap, it's going to depend on the decisions that you're making. So we want to be shouting out 6,000. Okay, and hopefully you're getting the same information back from your buddy now. All right, we constantly monitor it and we constantly verbalize it. The C stands for communicate. This is the key thing. Now that we've made contact with another jumper, we are no longer a solo jumper. We are now a team, and we need to work together. So the T stands for teamwork, working out the solution together. When we communicate, we use positive commands. Stop, wait, all right? We don't want to use anything like don't, because obviously if you hear the word don't, then obviously you're going to do exactly what you've just asked that person not to do. All right, cutaway. I don't know if you know this, but generally if you haven't done much crew, then cutaway is only used as a command. Very, very important. You don't want to tell him your life story that you're about to cut away, because he's going to hear the word cut away and start cutting away through you. So it's definitely only a command, used as a command. It's backed up by a visual motion, okay? So anytime you're seeing this from your buddy and the arm's going down to the side, okay, on either side, that probably means he can't talk for whatever reason, full-faced helmet, lines around the neck, all that sort of stuff. All right, and he needs you to release the tension. He needs you to get off your system. The key word is the last word, or the thing we've already talked about, is teamwork. It's a very key part of this, okay? We are now working together. We need to help each other out and then verbalize what we're going to do. It may be that you can communicate to the other jumper and say, it's just a line on your foot, relax. I'm going to lift your right foot, I'm going to take it out, right? Or that you may have to decide something more serious. But the key thing is that you're going to have to work through it together. If I'm the bottom jumper and I'm the rappee, I like to call it, I'm the rapper, sorry, and I've flown into somebody else, then I need to start communication, because really at this stage, I can't really do much about the situation. In terms of like the communication, it's probably a good thing to reassure the person above you that it's not a good idea to cut away, and therefore you have a good canopy is always good. Continue to monitor the altitude, because chances are the guy above you is going to be trying to sort out the problem and may lose altitude awareness. You might be able to see a solution. You might be able to see something from underneath that he can't see. We've already talked about the line across a foot, something like that. Add the tension onto the front riser, outside front riser, can maintain altitude, and you're the person in that situation that might cut away. So your expectation, if you can't solve that solution or you're going through your hard deck, is that the cutaway command is going to come. If you have the calmness and the coolness to disconnect your RSL, go ahead and do that too. Much respect. Okay, on the top jumper, I've been wrapped around. I need to find out that I'm okay, and I need to make sure that I need to get out of this material. So the way to do that is to go back to your shoulders. We have a tendency to kind of climb towards the light. It's quite an interesting scenario being wrapped up in a parachute, and one that I've learned to love over the years. But we definitely have this sort of feeling that I want to get out. I want to sort of start climbing out through light. And the way to find your way out is actually go back to your shoulders. Because if I go back to my shoulders, then I can get hold of my risers, and then I can follow my risers up, and I can pull material down and away. If I can't sort out the situation, or if the situation gets worse, or I'm going through my hard deck, we're going to talk about all this in a second, then I need to give that cutaway command. If I've given that cutaway command, I need to recognize that that release is about to happen. The material is going to start flying again, possibly, and start to give me more problems. So I need to anticipate that release and make sure I control whatever I get left with. If it's a successful cutaway from the guy below me, all right, and I can clear it off my body, don't think, oh, it's $1,800 or $2,000. I'll take it back to the DZ for him. Forget it. Get rid of it. The reason why is that we don't want that thing to start flying again, particularly if we're in turns or close to the ground. Do your own canopy control check. Check your handles, all that good stuff. There are some situations where, and I kind of touched on them already, where an immediate cutaway is required by the bottom jumper. The first situation is if it gets violent. And it's great, because when I was learning in the crew side of things, their definition of violent is quite funny. 3 times around. So 3 360s, if you see the runway spinning around 3 times below you, that's a violent situation. So that gives you an entitlement to get off it. Or if the upper jumper body goes limp, or you lose communication and it seems like there's something wrong with that person. That's a situation where perhaps the weight of your system has somehow got to a situation which is hindering that top jumper, and therefore we need to remove that weight off the system. Okay, very difficult situation that. And if we're going through a hard deck. So if your hard deck is 2,000 feet and you're going through that hard deck in the sport world, then you obviously have made a decision. You know what? I need this time, I need to get off it. All right, again, still above our hard deck, but now let's talk about the entanglements. Huge area, and we can make it very, very simple, because we can really define it in 2 situations. There's going to be 2 outcomes. So if you remember, the entanglement section is where part of your system or body has gone through a line of somebody else's. Okay, so the 2 possible situations, quite straightforward, is there's no defined top and bottom jumper. And we can guess what that's going to be looking like. You're going to be spinning around each other, and things are going to be happening very fast. Okay. The other way is that actually it's quite slow speed, and there's definitely someone above and there's definitely someone below. Let's deal with the no definition of the top and bottom at the moment. So you're spinning around. This is likely to be a stage cutaway, perhaps of both jumpers. I have the utmost respect for a very famous crew jumper in America who told me that if that's the situation, I'll always let the other guy cut away first, because maybe I can solve and still land under my main. So I was quite impressed with that. But if you're spinning around each other, then you're going to have to look at cutting away. And what we try and do is understand, establish altitude, communication, teamwork, and trying to stage the release, all right, so that you're not cutting away into each other. If there is an obvious top and bottom jumper, this is really one of the most generalized situations. The only way that's going to happen is if the top jumper has gone through the lines and kind of like an umbrella has pulled his system down. He falls down through your system and ends up hanging off your system side by side. Or any situation where it's clear that you were initially the top jumper and you need to get off it. So this is normally a straight and level situation. The jumper will come through your lines, his parachute will cease to fly, and then his body will start to fall, and you'll end up either side by side saying, "Hi, how you doing?" Or he might be a little bit below you. That's a situation where the original top jumper would cut away first, okay? If that's the situation, then if he's gone through your equipment like that, then you need to make sure that his cutaway is possible and help him with a little friendly push, or make sure you help him clear his system, or make sure it's obvious that it's not going to make the situation worse by him cutting away. Push the jumper away with force. If we're below 1,500 feet, and okay, now we can bring it all together because now our time and the altitude is there no more. So now we need to make decisions. So we kind of use 1,500 feet as a good average of our hard deck, but below our hard deck, or 1,500 feet, what we need to do is altitude, communicate, teamwork, be prepared to land two jumpers under one parachute. Okay, this is very doable on large parachutes. On small parachutes, it's a little bit more interesting, but definitely as a last resort, we could land two people under one canopy. If you are the one with the good jumper, then this is the time when you want to secure your buddy. You want to start picking up lines, wrapping your foot around, making sure that he's not going to fall off your system as you get lower and close to the ground. You want to control your own parachute, fly straight and level, avoid turns, and it's generally considered polite to flare for the lower jumper. I would actually say, depending on whose fault it was. And a good old PLF, prepared to PLF if we need to. If, and this is our last resort and the worst possible situation, we're below our hard deck, we have a collision, we're spinning around each other, then this is the time to get material out. This is the time to try and get as much material to decelerate both bodies before the impact comes. So this is where you would pull your reserve, okay? Get as much material out. Final word is about the knife. The knife itself, I think in the BPA, we are required to carry one. We are required to carry one. It's generally only used in very low speed situations. Okay, so we need to be very careful about using a knife anywhere near parachute equipment. So if you are thinking about using your knife, you need to know what you are cutting. All right, and we talk about, and generally it's kind of like, I'd rather go for a malfunction, I'd rather go through my reserve procedures and get off that bad system than try and cut away, or try and cut lines and material. The plastic ones that we come with most of our rigs nowadays, I think this is changing quite a lot, but we see those quite a lot around drop zones. I would take the time and the money to invest in a stronger version than the plastic one that you are supplied by some manufacturers. Also, in terms of position on the rig, that kind of becomes a very personal thing about where works for you. You know, if you're right-handed, left-handed, where you think you can reach easier. I personally wear mine on my hip, on my system. And then, yeah, don't use it for anything else except for an emergency. Yeah. Any questions on any part of the stuff that we've covered? Great. Oh, one final thing I want to talk about, because it came up a couple of years ago when I did this presentation a couple of years ago, and it's like, what about RSLs? What about sky hooks? What about full-faced helmets? And those are all valid questions, and all valid questions in terms of to ask yourself about what you would do. Yes, in reality, we want to be able to disconnect the RSL or the sky hook, and we want to maintain our level of coolness so that we can do that. And yes, we do jump with full face helmets, and it will be difficult to hear each other under that situation. But those are some of the risks that we have, and there are options hopefully to open up lids or even get rid of helmets perhaps. But they are choices that we make as skydivers based on the information that we know. Great, thank you very much indeed for your time.
It's your blame.